Okay, Paul, I think that we are live. So we're going to hand it over to you to talk all about rose care in spite of the frozen tundra swirling behind you today.
Absolutely. Welcome, people. I'm Paul. I am from Glover Nursery, and here is what we have, at least for right now, for roses. But man, do we have all kinds of roses that are on their way. Our first big wave of roses will be arriving that first week of April, but we also do have some roses that we've carried over from last year. They're in our rose house. We'll have a decent amount, but man, we'll have so much more. But today we're going to talk about thinking about taking care of roses this time of the year. Though if you look outside right now, it seems more like January. However, it's still a good time to start making a plan for roses. My personal calendar is all determined by this guy right here. So these came in from Oregon, so they're blooming a little earlier. But these are forsythias. Forsythias typically are that first bloom for spring. And forsythias tend to tell you that, that the season is now warm enough that it is safe to prune roses, and that hopefully we will be getting gradually higher temperatures, and you won't have any risk of damage that could happen due to a late freeze. Generally with roses, you don't want to do a lot of pruning in the fall. You do a lot of tip pruning in the fall to control for breakage due to snow, especially the kind of heavy snow we've received this year. But you don't want to do too much pruning because you need to account for whatever winter is going to take with some dieback, and that's completely normal. So that's why the bulk of all of your rose pruning is going to happen in the springtime. Generally, it happens in March or whenever this guy here in your landscape or in your neighbor's landscape gives you the go-ahead to do it.
It's like the canary of spring.
It absolutely is.
Canary in
It
the
absolutely is. So what we've got right here, we did a lot of our own pruning last year because we could safely keep these roses in a house where they wouldn't suffer from any undue freeze exposure. So we've done a lot of this pruning early. But again, I wouldn't suggest your roses looked like this if you planted them last year. But this is sort of what you want your rose to end up looking like in the after it's safe pruned. So this kind of gives you an idea of what happens. Roses love to be pruned, so don't feel badly about cutting roses back. And there's a lot of different rules about how you prune a rose, but generally, it's just a matter of getting out there, making nice clean cuts, and shaping your rose initially for the springtime. Here in Utah, which is a great place to grow roses, we expect our first big flush of roses in May, June. And then obviously with ever-blooming roses, like all of these are, you do need to deadhead them over time to keep them to bloom. And then you would expect another big flush of blooms in September again. Another great time for roses. So when pruning, if you got a rose, you've also got to invest in really good pruners. So these guys are Felcos, which are the very best pruners you can buy. These guys can help you prune trees and such, but also a sharp pair of pruners is critical for pruning anything so that you get nice clean cuts. When you are pruning roses, what you want to do is prune them on the bevel. So you can kind of see that we've not chopped it as much as we've given it kind of an angled cut. And what that angled cut does is it makes sure that nature will then kind of slide off of that cut, won't settle in there. That'll enable the rose to heal over properly. Roses, again, very used to being pruned. You don't need to do a lot of cane sealing initially in the springtime. Roses are used to this kind of necessary damage that you do. They'll heal over nicely. You can also see where you're doing it. So like right here, you can see what we've done is there used to be another longer part of this. And what we did is we cut maybe an inch, maybe a half inch above that cut. What that does is that will force this new initial flush. And that's a nice, healthy way to, can you see it? There you go.
Yeah, a little bit. Oops, I got caught.
Whoops, sorry, you got caught. Remember, roses have thorns, so beware of that. For instance, I think this one here, that's a little too tight of a cut, right? It's technically okay, but you're still very close to that bud. This guy here, you're giving the plant enough opportunity to recover from this damage and now reorient itself towards this new bud, and that's where all that new initial flush is going to come from. Remember that with roses, every time you prune it and it replaces that tissue, there is a rose on the other end of it. There are some exceptions. Some of the big shrub roses that you see in former farmland, like the big Austrian copper roses, they'll only bloom once a year. But generally, all the other roses that we'll sell you will be ever blooming roses, which means that as long as you are deadheading them, removing the fruit that those roses would form, those are called hips, they're like little apples, then the rose will continually bloom. But roses also tend to bias a lot of their full flush to the cool parts of the season, hence that May, June first flush, and then when it cools off again, another big flush in September into October. And if we have a nice fall, you'll have roses that will bloom close to the first part of November. Now is a good time to think about other kinds of rose care than just pruning. Disease control is really important. This has been a wonderfully wet winter, which we obviously are still experiencing. There's an upside to this. We got plenty of water. That's a good thing for all of our roses. Roses like the Utah heat and dry, but they also appreciate a decent amount of water so they can push all that fluid into their flowers and give you the biggest flowers that they can. However, wet temperatures also means that we do increase the possibility for certain kinds of rose diseases here in Utah. Very lucky that we don't have a lot of fungal-borne diseases in Utah, but we do have things like powdery mildew, maybe some leaf spot every now and then, but nothing like folks in other more humid parts of the country have to deal with. But I think this year you're probably going to expect to see more powdery mildew than we've seen over the past couple of years, where it's been drier coming out of the winter months. So that means you want to be thinking of some kind of a fungicide product that you can spray on. I would probably not do it today, but once it warms up, it'll warm up by this time next week, and you can put these on. So these are two different kinds of fungicides. This is a copper fungicide, more copper fungicide as well. This is what's called RTU, or ready to use. So this would be stuff that you would be spraying on your roses, but you would do this with a by pumping it. Otherwise, this is a hose end sprayer, and this is probably if you've got a substantial rose collection, and this would just start to wear on your arms doing it. But this is something that you would just put on the end of your hose and spray away. So that's going to be some fungicide for your fungus control. Other kinds of problems that we're probably going to see this spring, you're going to see aphids. Aphids are something that we tend to have here in Utah, and the nice part about our dry Utah summers is that our aphid problems do tend to literally dry up when it gets too hot for those guys to survive. But you will see a pretty substantial aphid population when it's still cool in the springtime. There are lots of aphid eggs that are probably sitting on your roses right now, just waiting for the right time to begin to wake up. So a horticultural spray is a good idea, and what this will do is it will smother those eggs. So here's one that is more of an organic product. It's a biofungicide, and it's a bactericide as well. This will help to control those populations. And then this is another horticultural oil. Oils are the ones that really help to suffocate a lot of those eggs that are nested inside the crotches of branches and such. Now, a lot of those that population is going to be removed as you're pruning your roses as well. But you would put this on after you prune as a way to ensure that any populations that are still left over have been taken care of. This is not going to control all of your aphids. Get ready for aphids this year. Aphids we have other products you can use to control aphids. but aphids oftentimes are easily controlled simply with a hose and sprayer. Aphids are kind of like chickens, so they really can't fly that much. Therefore, they will, once they're removed from your roses, oftentimes with that hose and sprayer, they end up somewhere else, they dry up and die.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to use a lot of pesticide to control aphids, and then just kind of hunker down during the cool parts of the year, because as the season starts to dry out and get warmer, your aphid populations will begin to subside. You will then probably see a return of those in the fall, and that's also a good time to control for those aphid populations so that the eggs that they're laying in the fall don't end up overwintering and then repeating the problem later on in the spring.
Perfect.
Feeding roses is also something else that you want to think of doing. When we say feeding, obviously, roses are going to be making their own food. That's why they have leaves. But what you're doing is you're adding spare parts into the ground that the plant will then use to build all that it needs to build leaves and photosynthesize and just take care of itself. Two very good organic fertilizers that you can use for roses include things that actually say rose and flower. For instance, this guy here from Gardner and Bloom. With fertilizer, you've got to remember that analysis is nitrogen, phosphoric acid, and potassium. A lot of the food that you want to give your blooming plants, including roses, ought to have that bigger middle number, because phosphoric acid is what helps plants to root out, but also to set bud and to bloom. So this is a very good product to use. It's organic as well, which means that you don't have to be as careful using it. You can make mistakes with this and not risk burning the plant. Another really good one that you can use, I use it on my rose collection. I've got 100 roses at home. That's a commitment, I'll tell you.
That
And
is.
so when feeding a garden of that size, a lot of times you just don't have the time to be very precise. What's nice about this product, and this is called Milorganite. Milorganite is something that you see marketed for general use in a landscape. A lot of times this is used for lawns, and in fact it kind of tells you that it's used for lawns. But Milorganite is another one of these organic products that can be used on anything in your garden. And I have been using Milorganite on my roses for many, many years now. And what I'm doing with that is I'm just kind of scooping a cup and distributing that. I don't have to be very precise because I got to move through a lot of plants to make sure everything's taken care of. This is a nice way to make sure that you're feeding things and yet you're not risking burning as well.
Beautiful.
So, like I said, we have roses to shop from now.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be getting David Austin roses in. Those will be ready probably around Memorial Day. And otherwise, we will be getting our first wave of Weeks roses. And Weeks is an amazing grower of roses. Yeah. Those roses are all being grown outside of Bakersfield right now. So when they arrive, they're going to look totally prime. And we'll be getting those the first week of April.
And we did get in some Easy Elegance and some Baileys that are pretty phenomenal, actually.
Exactly. So Easy Elegance is another one that is is making roses a little bit more
user-friendly?
User-friendly, exactly. Lots of people are afraid of roses, and for good reason. Roses obviously have thorns. Roses do sort of imply that there's a little bit more work to do than some of your other blooming plants in your yard. The Easy Elegance series has been designed to make a rose that can be as easy to take care of and still own a rose. Easy Elegance is nice because they do well as a mass planting if you want to have a line of nice color. There's nothing like a rose to give you color nearly all season long. Most other flowering shrubs don't do that. And the nice part about Easy Elegance as well is that so many of them have also been bred for fragrance. Mm-hmm. As rose growers are looking for better flowers, sometimes you see that the fragrance part of it is sacrificed. The Easy Elegance folks are looking for ways to get good-looking flowers, but also preserve that fragrance that a lot of people will plant roses to get.
Awesome. Paul, that was a font of information and beautifully shared. The sign to prune roses is when you see forsythia blooming. Now
Exactly.
these are cheap forsythia.
These are cheap because they came out of Oregon, so these guys they're awake probably 2 weeks early.
Right.
So keep an eye out. You can certainly prune your roses earlier than that.
Right.
But for me, I've used forsythias just as that natural sign that the rest of the world out there is prepared. Therefore, I can go out there and safely take care of my roses.
Perfect. So look for forsythia blooming in your neighborhood. Tip number 2, spraying with copper, spraying with horticulture oil to do some pest prevention, fungal prevention. Tip number 3, fertilize. These are a couple of great products. I think there's also another one that has sort of the weed and feed and disease granules all at once.
Mhm.
If you want to go that route. And finally, and pruners, key. So
Yes.
talk a little bit about Felco. I bought Felcos, and these are the kind of pruners that you name.
Yes.
You know, like
So
you're
Felcos,
never going to get rid of
These are
them.
the Cadillac of pruners. And
Yeah.
These are pruners that if you take care of them, put them in your will and give them to your grandkids. They're going to cost you. But Felcos, let's just say this. Life is too short for a cheap pair of pruners. These guys here will last you a long time. Again, with proper care, these are pruners that you can do virtually anything in the yard that you need to, other than just pruning roses. But these are the kinds of garden tools that you will grow old with.
Yeah. So just so people know, they're not the cost of a car, but you're going to pay around $80 to $120 depending on the kind that you get.
They're very well worth it.
They're worth it, and you won't be buying them year after year. So it's a good investment.
Exactly.
All right, Paul, that was perfect. Brilliant. So if you're here at Glover Nursery, folks have questions, and any other last minute, since you have so many roses, any last thoughts in preparation for your own rose garden?
Again, I'm just waiting for wintertime to leave us. We thought everything was going to start to warm up yesterday, and then you wake up today with lots of snow. But this is not going to be forever, so remain vigilant. Spring will be here before you know it.
And just because we didn't do this at the very beginning, you are here at Glover Nursery. Talk to us about what you do here at Glover.
I'm the sales team manager here at Glover, so my team is out there to help you make all kinds of decisions about all the plants that you need. I myself am just a rose enthusiast, so I'm kind of the go-to guy for roses, but my team is here to help you with virtually everything you need when it comes to fruit trees and shade trees and shrubs and roses. We can help you with perennials, vegetables, annuals.
Evergreens.
The evergreens,
conifers, all things.
All kinds of stuff. We've got it all here at Glover Nursery.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll see ya.